When it comes to fighting games, there's always a few characters that aren't played as much as the others, whether that be because the character's design, moveset, lore, or personality, for one reason or another, they just seem to be neglected by many. But why is that? Today I'll be looking into a specific character and come to a conclusion for why said character is unpopular. And that character I'll be looking into today is the Phantasm of Snow and Ice, Kolin. It's a bit more of a mysterious case. A character who was one of the most well-received Street Fighter newcomers, having one of the best first months for a Street Fighter V DLC character, to being ranked the lowest out of all the female characters in Street Fighter V in Capcom's popularity poll. Kolin was added to the Street Fighter V roster on the 28th of February 2017 as part of the game's second DLC pack. Initial reactions to Kolin were overall very positive. Kolin's counter-heavy system of fighting style went over well with the fans. Her design was also well received. She sports a long dress like Afghanka that goes nicely with her black Ushanka hat. Excuse me if I'm butchering those words, I'm not a fucking Russian. Very elegant, might I say. Her design doesn't go over the top with the sex appeal like many of the other characters on the roster, which I'm sure we could all appreciate. Everything about Kolin, even down to her theme, was met with overwhelmingly positive feedback. So Kolin's future in Street Fighter V looked very bright. But when she was released, it quickly became apparent Kolin was not so user-friendly. Kolin's usage rate for her first month of being in Street Fighter V came in at a whopping 10.3%. She was the second most played Street Fighter character, only behind Ryu, which is insane. But only 2 months later, Kolin dropped to 3.3. That's a 7% difference in a relatively short amount of time. Kolin turned out to be on the harder side when it comes to learning a character. A big portion of Kolin's gameplay relies on reading your opponent. You need to be able to understand your opponent's character's options to use Kolin's counters effectively, which was also a big part of her game. Her strengths were her counters, her setups, and her well thought out cross-ups, which all require a fairly high level of understanding in the Street Fighter V game, opposed to many of the other Street Fighter V characters who required a fraction of the understanding and could still compete at the same level as Kolin. Many casual players like myself don't bother to study every character's frame data, as it can be very time consuming. I'm here to play a video game and have fun, not study like I'm in school. This, I believe, led to Kolin being dropped by many players shortly after her release. But enough about Kolin's gameplay, let's learn more about Kolin. What are her goals and morals, and what is her path and purpose in the Street Fighter universe? Kolin, originally known as Helen, which I will now be referring to her as, served in the military of her home country, which was not revealed to us by Capcom. But due to her strong accent and attire, she is presumably of Russian descent. Helen served her country with pride. It was her life. Her country was who she was. But sadly for Helen, doomsday would soon approach. Helen had to watch everyone she served with get slaughtered whilst trying to defend their beloved homeland. Helen managed to survive the brutal war, but had to see her land engulfed in flames. The country that she loved so very much was now destroyed. Helen was left to walk aimlessly, for she had nowhere to go, no home, no family, no friends, no direction. Her country was all she had, and it made her who she was as a person. And now that that was all gone, Helen became a shell of her former self. Gil from the Secret Society revealed himself to her, extending his hand and offering her a spot in the new country, a place where sorrow doesn't exist, a place that is run by harmony. As Helen described it, she felt like she was looking into the face of an angel, accepting his offer and becoming part of the Secret Society. Time passes and the events of Street Fighter V take place, and Bison and Shadaloo create the Black Moons to empower Bison's psycho power in hopes of making him strong enough to achieve world domination. But the Secret Society's prophecy would beg to differ. Helen was given the task of stopping the Black Moons, and the mission was being supervised by Urien. She created a team consisting of Jiri, Rashid, and a resurrected Charlie Nash. The team's chemistry wasn't great, but they all shared the same desire to stop Shadaloo and Bison, so they all came to an understanding. Unfortunately for Helen, the team was unsuccessful. Nash was killed, whose purpose was to defeat Bison. Jiri ventured off to fight Kami's battles, and Rashid's main goal was to save his friend, who was also unsuccessful. At the end of it all, we see Urien taunting Helen, mocking her for her failure. Helen would have to face Gil. She informs him that Bison was indeed stopped as the prophecy foretold, but by the hands of Ryu, not Nash. She apologizes for her failure, Gil acknowledges this, but instead of punishing Helen, he says the world is still destined to be what it was set to be, and a slight difference in the scripture doesn't change the prophecy. He then promotes Helen for her efforts, thus giving her the name of Kolin. Kolin is now seen in the events of Third Strike in her Kolin persona, serving Gil as his loyal secretary. And that's where her story ends for now. After learning about Kolin's story, I can understand where her cold-hearted attitude comes from. Imagine a place that you love full of a bunch of people that you care about being completely annihilated in a war that you yourself take a part of. This would in turn make Kolin completely despise soldiers of any kind. We see her refer to Colonel Taylor and Guile as pathetic dogs. She blames them for what happened to her home, feeling they destroy and cause pain in the world, and use hope and dreams as a way to justify what they do and make them feel better about themselves when it's all been done. The fact that Kolin says family and friends is a sad burden shows how her emotions have become somewhat numb, pun intended. She follows that by saying they'll all suffer and die, leaving you to mourn them. Kolin can come off as a calm and conserved individual, but she's actually pretty hot-headed. We've seen how she could just lash out in like a second. She'll be calm and then angry. She did it to Nash in A Shadow Falls and Guile in her character's story. This I'd say was due to all of her past traumas. Now for my final verdict. Why do I think Kolin is unpopular? And to be honest, it's pretty hard to tell. Kolin by no means, to me, seems like an unpopular character. I see a lot of love for her around the internet, but based on the results of the popularity poll and how her usage rate just plummeted, something isn't adding up. If I had to make a guess and go out on a whim here, I'd have to say it's her difficult gameplay. It seems the majority of people believe Kolin is on the harder side of the learning spectrum. I hear her parries are extremely satisfying to land, but it takes practice to actually land them in an online match. She isn't a beginner-friendly character, which fans quickly learned, hence them dropping her only 2 months after her release. I feel many people wanted to play Kolin, but learning her must have just been a pain in the rear. My final verdict for why do I think Kolin is unpopular, and I'd have to say it is her difficult gameplay. It's been the Master's Alien, and I am out of here.